If you don't find out this information before getting married, you are risking being married to the wrong person. So just because someone is a good boyfriend or you have fun when you go out with them, they pay on dates, whatever, does not mean that they're going to be a great husband. Let me explain the 5 most important things that you need to find out to determine if he's actually marriage material. This one is so important. His willingness to be a caretaker. So God forbid something happens to you and you are no longer able to take care of yourself. And I'm talking, you can't feed yourself, you can't go to the bathroom by yourself. And it doesn't have to be permanent, just temporarily, right? So you get injured or something. And for a couple months, you cannot do any of those things for yourself. And he has to take care of you. He has to literally wipe your butt and feed you and make all of your meals and dress you. You cannot take care of yourself. Is he the kind of man who's going to do that? We don't like to think about it. It's very morbid to think about this kind of stuff, but you need to be with someone. Whoever you marry is supposed to be your life partner. They're supposed to be there throughout all the nitty gritty, all the nasty, whatever. Is he willing to do that? And that's not necessarily something you can just ask, right? You can't just ask someone, hey, if I was in an accident, like, would you take care of me? 9 times out of 10, most people are going to say yes. There are some people who are going to be honest and be like, nah, but you can find out these things by spending time with them. Anytime you're dating someone, you should be spending significant amount of time with them, intentional time. You need to be spending different situations with them. So for example, before my husband and I got married, my dad got really sick before he passed away. I became his caretaker. You know who was right there along with me? My boyfriend at the time, not even my husband. My now husband, was right there at my dad's place, helping me get him up, helping me take him to the hospital, making sure all of his all of those things. My husband was right there doing it with me. Sometimes even when I couldn't be there, he was taking over my role for me. So that was enough to tell me, and I already knew, right? I already knew that my husband is that kind of person. But that told me if I were ever in this situation, I don't even have to think about whether he would be there. I know he would be there. Put yourself in different situations. That could even be, and that could be, how does he take care of if you have pets, if you have siblings? How does he help you take care of responsibilities that you have? That could be pets, that could be siblings. What is his demeanor? How does he show up? How does he offer his help? How does he support you with those things? That is a clear indication of whether he has the ability or whether he is a caretaker type of man. Does he have appropriate boundaries with his mother? So I talk about this a lot on platform, and I say this as someone who has a great relationship with my mother-in-law. A man should have appropriate boundaries with his mother. There are so many son husbands out there. Essentially, these are men who were raised to basically fulfill all of their mother's emotional needs. They then develop an unhealthy and toxic dynamic, almost codependent dynamic with their mothers, where they think their mother should be the first and most important woman in their life. When that dynamic is there, there's really no room for any other woman to be in that man's life. So what happens with these son husbands, they don't have any kind of boundaries that make sense between a son and mother. She pretty much has say over his entire life. Now, why is that a problem? Well, if you are his wife, you should have more say over what happens in your lives, right? Because you are now a unit and you have this life together. You should have more say than his mother. But with men who don't have appropriate boundaries with their mother, typically that's not the case. Typically the mother has more say in your life than you do. You basically become second. You end up feeling neglected, insecure. That may cause you to seek out attention from other places that you shouldn't be seeking it out from. It just creates a lot of issues. So you need to make sure that he has those appropriate boundaries in place before you consider marrying him. And you'll find those things out. With a man who doesn't have boundaries with his mother, they usually are very close with their moms. And not to say that if a man is close with his mom, it means he is automatically a son husband or doesn't have boundaries. What I'm saying is, if he does not have boundaries, he is likely close with his mom. So you will have several opportunities to see how they interact. And that should give you a sense of whether those boundaries are there and whether the relationship between he and his mom is appropriate and makes sense. Where does he stand on kids? And does that align with where you stand on kids? Despite people trying to do this, there is not a compromise when it comes to kids. If he wants kids and you don't, unfortunately, the relationship is just going to need to end because you can't have half a child. Somebody is going to be unhappy. You never want to have a situation where a child is brought into a relationship unwanted by one person. So if you guys do not align on where you are with kids, the relationship needs to end. And this even extends to the number of kids. So if he wants a bunch of kids, he wants like 5 kids, and you want to be one and done, same thing applies. You can't really compromise on that. Somebody is going to be unhappy, and you don't know how that's going to impact the child, most importantly, and your relationship. You gotta find that out. That is super, super crucial to find out. If you guys do not align, unfortunately, you gotta separate, which is why it's important to find out this information early so that you don't get too invested and then try to like avoid making a decision. You just gotta end it right away. Marriage timeline. How long does he think it makes sense to date? If he's one of those people who doesn't have a timeline, he's like, I just, when I feel ready, but your timeline is like no more than 2 years of dating and we're getting married, you got to find that out. If you don't find that out and you guys are not aligned, you're going to feel like you're being drug along. He's going to feel pressured, and it's not going to be a good situation. You may have to end up giving him an ultimatum that's not going to feel good for you or good for him. So that's a conversation that needs to be had beforehand. Obviously, that's not something that you necessarily want to bring up on like the first date. Most men have an idea of when they want to get married. For most men, it is a lot older than it is for women. Why? They don't have the biological time clock that women have. Women have to be very organized and structured with how they're planning their life if they want. Men don't have to do that. Men can literally get married when they're 50 and have kids and like whatever. Women can't do that. So we typically come to the table with a very detailed and structured 5-year plan when it comes to family. Like, I want to be married by this age. I want to have my first kid by this age, my second kid by this age. The men are kind of just like winging it for the most part. And not all of them, though. Not all men are winging it. Some men do say like, hey, I want to be married by this age. So that's information that you need to find out before you commit too seriously with a man. Does his life vision align with yours? If you want to be an entrepreneur, but he craves stability and he wants to work a 9 to 5, there's nothing wrong with that, but there are a lot of implications for one, and what life is going to look like, as well as for personality. Someone who knows that they want to work a 9 to 5, they don't ever want to do anything else. That is someone who wants to be more stable, like structure, might want to move up the corporate ladder. Like, life might look very differently for them. As for someone who's an entrepreneur, they might be more okay with taking risks. They have to be okay with being broke sometimes, because as an entrepreneur, you are going to go through ebbs and flows, right? Like a lot of change. Those are very different personality types. So you have to make sure that those are actually going to work. If like you hate the cold and okay, the places that I want to settle down in are, you got Florida, you got Texas, you got Arizona, like all of the warm places. And he's someone who loves the cold. So he's like Boston, New York, Michigan. Okay, that might seem like not a big deal, but when it comes down to you guys deciding where you're going to end up, that's a huge conversation, right? How do you compromise there? These are really, really important things to figure out. And you're going to be able to find these things out just through dating and conversation. Like I always say, make sure that you're spending very intentional time with someone before you, I hope whoever that is okay. Intentional time with them before you commit to even a relationship, but especially before you start to think about marriage. And really, like if you want to be married one day, you should be dating with the intention of marriage. So you should not get into a relationship with them and then figure these things out. You should figure these things out before you decide if you want to be in a relationship with them. And guys, I cannot stress, do not show up to the first date with an interview booklet and like ask him, are you a caretaker? Will you be willing to wipe my butt if you need to? Like, don't do that. Most of these things will come out naturally. Just be intentional, be observant, be hyper vigilant, and this information will come out. Just make sure you have the full picture before you decide whether someone is marriage material and whether he is someone who is worth you moving towards that step with. Because I can guarantee you, he's making his own mental notes about whether you're wife material. But yeah, you got it. Don't forget to subscribe and talk soon.